What if the angels who fell weren't just rebels but ancient beings, who revealed forbidden knowledge to humanity? What if one man Enoch was taken beyond the stars, into the very heavens, to witness their judgment firsthand? This is not just a myth. This is a vision, a revelation, and a warning. Today, we unveil the terrifying and mysterious things that Enoch saw in the heavens. Prepare yourself for a journey through ancient texts, cosmic rebellion, and the secrets of the Watchers, the fallen angels who changed the course of human history. Long before the Great Flood, before Moses ascended Mount Sinai, before Abraham heard the voice of God under the stars, there was a man who walked with God so intimately that he did not die. His name was Enoch, the seventh from Adam, and his story, largely hidden from the modern Bible, unlocks one of the most profound mysteries in ancient spiritual literature: the fall of the angels. Known as the Watchers, and what Enoch saw in the heavens that changed everything. The Book of Enoch, once treasured among early Jews and Christians, but later removed from most canons, opens with an apocalyptic vision. Enoch declares that his message is not for his generation, but for a future one, a generation that would experience the judgment of the fallen ones. The very first lines hint that this is not just a record of history. It is a prophecy preserved for the end times. Enoch was not a prophet in the ordinary sense. He was a scribe of heaven, a seer who wrote down what he saw not from earthly revelation alone, but from journeys into the celestial realms. He walked with God, and one day he was taken alive into heaven. And what he saw there was terrifying. The Book of Enoch tells us about a group of angels called the Watchers, or in Hebrew, Iron. They were appointed by God to watch over humanity, to guide and protect the creation below. But as they looked down upon the daughters of men, lust was born in them. These divine beings, meant to remain separate, fell into desire. 200 of them, led by a powerful figure named Semyaza, conspired to descend to earth and take human women as wives. On Mount Hermon, they swore a binding oath, fearing that only together could they defy the divine order without facing judgment alone. One by one, they descended, crossing the boundary between heaven and earth. And with this forbidden union, a race of giants was born, the Nephilim, beings of immense size and strength, unnatural hybrids of heaven and earth. But it wasn't only their offspring that corrupted the world. These angels brought with them forbidden knowledge, mysteries that were never meant for humankind. Semyaza taught enchantments and root-cutting. Azazel revealed how to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, ushering in an age of bloodshed and war. Others taught astrology, the signs of the stars, the movement of the moon, the secrets of the clouds. Humanity, once innocent, became intoxicated with divine secrets. And soon the earth was filled with violence, sorcery, and abomination. The cries of the righteous, the blood of the innocent, and the agony of a world unraveling reached the very heavens. And it was then that God summoned Enoch not to judge, but to witness. Enoch was taken by the angels into the higher realms, not just the sky, but the dimensions of the heavens that mortal man was never meant to see. He passed through gates of fire, through realms where stars sang and winds whispered ancient truths. He beheld the cosmic order, the foundations of the earth, the storehouses of the rain, the chambers of the sun and moon. And then, in the deepest reaches, He was brought to a terrible place, a prison of darkness, a canyon of cursed rocks and eternal flame. There, chained under the mountains of the earth, were the leaders of the Watchers, the fallen angels whose lust and pride had unleashed evil into creation. They were not in glory. They were not in rule. They were bound, burning, awaiting a final judgment. Their faces, once radiant, now twisted in torment. And Enoch, a mortal man, was commanded to record what he saw and deliver a message from God to these beings. The message was brutal. You were once in the heavens, holy and eternal, but now you shall not return. You have defiled yourselves with flesh and corrupted the image of God. Your sons, the giants, will perish by the sword. Their spirits will become wandering spirits on the earth, the very demons who haunt mankind. This was not just a story of rebellion. It was the origin of spiritual warfare, of demonic activity, of false religion, of a knowledge that destroys rather than builds. Enoch saw that the fall of the Watchers was not only a heavenly mutiny. It was the root of pervasive corruption, a chain reaction that would lead to the flood and beyond. But even in the midst of judgment, Enoch was shown the greatness of God's throne, a place of blazing fire, wheels of burning light, a river of flame flowing from beneath him. Thousands upon thousands of angels stood in worship. The Ancient of Days sat upon the throne, and in his presence all creation trembled. Before him, the fallen would be judged. Before him, Enoch would plead on behalf of humanity. Enoch's role was not just that of a witness but a mediator, a scribe who would carry the scrolls of heaven to men. He was told to write everything he saw and to pass it down for one day. In the final generation, the truth would be needed again. The fall of the Watchers, their punishment, and the corruption of earth were not just ancient history. Enoch saw a future return of these days when knowledge would explode, when wickedness would rise again, and when humanity would once again flirt with the forbidden. In those days, the righteous would need to be awakened. In those days, the voice of Enoch would speak again. As Enoch returned from the heavens, his face shone like lightning. The people feared him, but he did not stay long. God had one more mystery to reveal: the coming of the Messiah, the Son of Man, who would one day sit on the throne of glory and judge both angels and men. Enoch saw him before he was born. He described his face, his power, his dominion, and he wrote, "This is the one who shall bring peace." But the fallen angels knew they had lost their place. Their rage turned into vengeance. Their children, the Nephilim, raged against the earth, and soon the world would be so corrupt that only a flood could cleanse it. This was the world Enoch saw, a world not unlike our own. And this was only the beginning. As Enoch descended from the heavens, carrying visions of judgment and glory, the world below was no longer the same. The skies still shone. The mountains still stood. But something had shifted deep within the earth and even deeper within humanity. The line between the divine and the mortal had been breached. Heaven's fire had mingled with dust. And from this forbidden union came beings that were never meant to exist, the Nephilim. Born from the Watchers and human women, the Nephilim were giants in every sense, physically immense, spiritually distorted, and morally corrupted. These were not merely tall men. They were hybrid beings, reflections of a twisted image, something between angel and flesh. yet fully defiant of the Creator's design. Their appetites were uncontrollable, their strength unmatched, and their impact catastrophic. The ancient texts say that they devoured all the labors of men, and when humans could no longer sustain them, the giants turned on them, consuming not just crops, but human lives. Bloodshed, cannibalism, and war spread like wildfire. The very land groaned under the weight of their violence. Cities fell into ruin. Tribes turned to sorcery for power. Mothers wept for children taken in the night. The world, once called good, now teetered on the brink of annihilation. But the darkness did not stop with physical violence. The knowledge given by the Watchers, the secrets of heaven twisted into tools of domination, infected every aspect of life. The stars were no longer signs of God's order. They became objects of worship. The plants used for healing became weapons of enchantment. The art of creation became the technology of corruption. Humanity, once humble and dependent on God, now began to believe it could become like gods. And perhaps that was the greatest lie of all, that divine power could be taken without divine character. Azazel, one of the most prominent of the fallen, taught men how to forge weapons, swords, daggers, and shields, tools of war that would separate man from man. He instructed women in the art of seduction, adorning themselves with makeup and ornaments to provoke lust and pride. The very structure of family, identity, and community began to collapse. The Watchers, originally guardians of truth, had become the architects of corruption. But God was not silent. He saw every tear, every unjust death, every perversion of what was once holy, and the cries of the innocent rose to his throne. Enoch, still bearing the wisdom of the heavens, was called again, this time not merely as a messenger, but as a herald of judgment. He was shown visions of what would come next: the destruction of the Nephilim, the binding of the Watchers, and the cleansing of the earth. The judgment began with their children, the giants. God declared through Enoch that the Nephilim would destroy one another in a war of chaos, brother against brother, kingdom against kingdom. These hybrid monstrosities, whose very existence was an affront to divine law, would be consumed by the violence they had brought upon the world. But their deaths would not bring peace, because what emerged from their bodies was even more sinister. The spirits of the Nephilim, unfit for heaven and unfit for Sheol, were cursed to roam the earth as evil spirits, the origin of demons. These disembodied beings would forever thirst, never satisfied. They would whisper lies, provoke war, inspire idol worship, and seek to possess the bodies of men. Though the giants were gone, their legacy of torment would echo through generations. And what of the Watchers? Enoch was instructed to deliver God's decree to them. Once proud angels who had walked among the stars, they were now trembling in fear, begging for mercy, pleading for forgiveness, but finding none. Enoch was commanded to write their sentence. They would be bound in the valleys of the earth, in a prison of utter darkness, until the day of judgment. And in that prison they wait to this day. The earth, still bleeding from their influence, was now beyond healing. God, in his justice, determined to start again. A flood would come, not merely of water, but of divine reset. Every structure built on corruption would fall. Every nation stained by the Watchers' influence would be wiped clean. But in the midst of the chaos, there was one man who walked with God, Noah. He was the great-grandson of Enoch, a man of righteousness in a generation of rebellion. It was through him that God would preserve the human line, untouched by angelic corruption, and through him a new beginning would come. But even in this, the legacy of the Watchers was not erased. Their story would be whispered in myths, remembered in ruins, hinted at in legends of gods mating with mortals, the giants of ancient civilizations, the sudden leap of human technology, the dark arts, and symbols of power, all of it, traces of a time when the heavens touched the earth in defiance. Enoch saw it all, and he wrote not for his time, but for ours, because he knew that the days of Noah would come again. And when they do, the ancient Watchers will stir once more. The world will thirst again for forbidden knowledge. Mankind will once more trade obedience for power. And in those days, the words of Enoch will ring like thunder. The fallen ones were never just myths. They were real, and they're not finished. As the earth reeled under the weight of sin, corruption, and the lingering spirits of the Nephilim, Enoch was once again taken into the heavens not just to observe destruction, but to behold something even greater, the throne of God and the mysterious figure known as the Son of Man. The Book of Enoch lifts the veil between earth and eternity, revealing visions rarely seen by mortal eyes. In the presence of the holy angels, Enoch was led by one whose face shone like lightning, ascending through multiple layers of the heavens. Each layer revealed deeper dimensions of divine order, the storehouses of the winds, the paths of the stars, the boundaries of light and darkness. And then, at the edge of all created things, Enoch beheld the glory of the Most High. There, beyond the firmaments, stood the great throne structure ablaze with fire, wheels of glory spinning beneath it, and a river of flame flowing forth. Thousands upon thousands of angelic beings encircled the throne in worship, trembling in the overwhelming presence of the Ancient of Days. No words were spoken at first, only awe, the kind of silence that doesn't calm, but shakes the soul. Then, as Enoch stood before this throne, he was shown another figure, one like a son of man, clothed in white, with a countenance full of grace and terror. This being approached the throne with confidence. Unlike the Watchers who had been cast out for defying heaven's order, this figure was welcomed. All authority, all glory, all dominion was given to him, and the heavenly host fell down before him in worship. Enoch marveled. "Who is this?" he asked the angels standing beside him. The answer would unlock the future of mankind. "This is the elect one, the anointed, the Son of Man who was hidden in the presence of God since before creation. And now he will be revealed to judge the mighty, defend the righteous, and reign forever." This vision shook the foundation of everything Enoch had known. Until now, he had seen the devastation caused by rebellion. He had walked among prisons of fire, heard the screams of fallen angels, and watched the slow decay of humanity under the weight of secret knowledge. But now he saw the antidote, the final answer. The Son of Man, both divine and destined to walk among men, was the one through whom justice would come. The judgment that was declared wasn't just for the rebellious angels. It was for kings and rulers of the earth, those who had aligned themselves with the spirits of darkness, those who had exalted themselves in pride, those who had enslaved the weak and mocked the Creator. Their names were written in books, their deeds recorded, and a day was coming when those books would be opened. Enoch also saw the fate of the righteous, those who remained faithful in the midst of chaos. They would be raised up. Their names would be written in the book of life. They would shine like the stars and inherit a world made new. No more giants, no more demons, no more violence or deception, just peace, justice, and the reign of the Son of Man. But before this world could come, something terrible would unfold, the day of the great judgment. Enoch saw the heavens darken, the stars falling like withered leaves, the mountains melting like wax before the fire, the seas boiling, the earth shaking. This was not poetic language. It was cosmic upheaval, resetting of creation itself. And from the throne, the voice of the Son of Man would thunder, separating light from darkness, the faithful from the wicked. He would stand upon Mount Zion with 10,000 holy ones, and the fallen watchers, those still bound beneath the earth, would be dragged out and exposed before the host of heaven, and the remnant of mankind. Their judgment would be final. No plea, no mercy. They had sealed their fate the day they left their station and corrupted the daughters of men. Yet what amazed Enoch the most was not the wrath of God, but his justice. Every act weighed, every secret revealed, no suffering ignored, no faithfulness forgotten. Enoch saw that God had been watching all along. He had not abandoned his creation. He was preparing for a day when all would be made right. And in this future, the Son of Man was central not only as judge, but as savior. Enoch recorded that this figure would walk among men, be rejected by kings, and yet ultimately inherit the earth. He would gather the elect, destroy the works of the wicked, and usher in a kingdom that would never pass away. It would not be built by violence, but by righteousness, not ruled by terror, but by truth. What Enoch witnessed was more than just apocalypse. It was the gospel before the gospel, a vision of redemption long before Bethlehem, long before the cross. The Son of Man was not a last-minute solution. He was the plan from the beginning, hidden with God, waiting for the fullness of time. When Enoch returned from this vision, his face was transformed. Those who saw him were afraid, for he carried not only the glow of glory, but the weight of eternity. And yet he did not stop writing. He recorded everything, not for his own age, but for ours, because as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be again. The watchers may be bound, but their legacy still whispers in the ears of kings. The giants may be gone, but their spirits still roam the earth. And the hunger for forbidden knowledge still tempts humanity, now more than ever. But there is hope. There is a throne. There is a scroll, and there is one seated in glory who will not forget his promise. The Son of Man is coming, and this time every eye will see him. Though Enoch lived in the ancient days before the flood, his writings burned with a message that reached beyond his time into the distant future, into our time. It was as if Enoch stood at the edge of history, gazing through the veil of ages, and wrote to a generation yet to be born, a generation that would mirror the days of Noah, a generation that would hunger for power, worship knowledge, twist truth, and once again awaken the legacy of the Watchers. Enoch's words to this final generation were not vague prophecies. They were urgent warnings, written with fire and grief. He knew what would return, He had seen it all before. The slow descent of man into pride, the rebellion of heavenly beings, the contamination of creation, and he knew the cycle would repeat. In the Book of Parables, Enoch described how, in the latter days, rulers would exalt themselves like gods, building systems of power that enslaved others. Justice would disappear, the righteous would be mocked, the innocent silenced. Secret knowledge would once again be released not openly, but subtly cloaked in advancement, hidden beneath the veil of science, media, and manipulation. Humanity would celebrate its own brilliance while quietly submitting to the same spiritual deception that once destroyed the pre-flood world. The demonic offspring of the Nephilim, the disembodied spirits of the giants, would grow more active. They would not appear in monstrous form, but in influence, whispering lies into minds, distorting perception, provoking anger, greed, lust, and rebellion. These spirits, denied heaven and banished from Sheol, would crave embodiment, possessing those who opened doors through pride, perversion, or idolatry. Enoch warned that these spirits would specifically target leaders, kings, judges, priests, influencers, those with platforms. They would offer them power, insight, fame if only they turned from righteousness, and many would. He also foresaw the rise of false prophets and counterfeit messengers, those who claimed to speak for God but carried the spirit of the watchers. They would twist the truth, build empires in God's name, and lead many astray. Religion itself would become a tool of control rather than communion. Ritual would replace relationship, form without fire, and the remnant would grow smaller, more hidden, more desperate. But Enoch did not despair, even as he recorded the descent of man. He also proclaimed a promise that a faithful remnant would rise, a people purified through suffering, marked not by signs and wonders, but by faithfulness in secret. They would not bow to the beast. They would not be swayed by the world, and to them the scrolls of Enoch were given. Enoch wrote to awaken them, to remind them that this battle is older than the world, that their struggle is not merely political or cultural, it is spiritual, rooted in ancient rebellion, and that victory does not come through might, but through alignment with the coming king. He described how the final days would be filled with signs in the heavens, the moon darkened, the stars shaken from their courses, strange lights, and atmospheric disturbances, not merely symbolic, but actual cosmic tremors. These signs would not only mark the judgment of the fallen, but also the return of the Son of Man. Enoch foresaw a climactic confrontation, a time when the veil between realms would thin, when heaven would invade earth, not through soft whispers, but through roaring judgment. And in that moment, all would be revealed. The hidden sins of men, the secret influence of fallen powers, the manipulations behind governments and systems, the alliances forged in darkness. All of it would come into the light before the throne, and the Son of Man, who Enoch had seen standing in radiant glory, would descend in power with 10,000s of his holy ones, not angels alone, but glorified saints, the elect of the Most High. Together, they would judge both men and angels. But Enoch made one thing clear: judgment was not the end. It was the beginning of restoration, a new heaven, a new earth, purified, renewed. The mountains would melt, and a new mountain would rise, Zion, the eternal dwelling of the righteous. The sun and moon would shine with perfect clarity. The waters would flow with healing. The nations would walk in the light of the King. And the elect, those who held fast through the fire, would dwell with God forever. No more sorrow, no more death, no more giants or watchers or demonic whisperers. Only peace. This was the great hope hidden in Enoch's apocalyptic visions, that God had never lost control. That even when the world seemed utterly corrupted, even when angels fell, and men murdered, and giants roamed the earth, God's justice marched on, slow but unstoppable. To the last generation, Enoch's voice rings like a trumpet, not a whisper, but a roar. He does not call for fear, but for awakening. He does not call us to escape, but to stand, to remember who we are, to remember the war we're in, and to align ourselves with the one who is coming to end it once and for all. Because whether we are ready or not, the King is on his way, and this time he will not come as a lamb. The vision of Enoch, so often buried beneath layers of forgotten history, ends not in despair, but in glory. After witnessing the fall of the Watchers, the corruption of mankind, the birth of giants, and the judgment of the wicked, Enoch is shown the most powerful revelation of all, the return of the King and the restoration of creation. In the final visions, Enoch sees the Son of Man now no longer hidden, no longer a mystery rising to rule over the nations. His face like lightning, his voice like the roar of many waters. He is surrounded by legions of holy ones, not just angels, but those who have overcome, those who have endured the fire of testing and held fast to the truth. The books are opened, the thrones are set, and the judgment begins not as vengeance, but as a divine alignment of all things back to the will of the Creator. What the fallen Watchers tore apart, the Son of Man begins to mend. What sin disfigured, he begins to reshape. The earth itself, which had been scarred by violence, demonic influence, and pride, is now washed in righteousness. Enoch sees a world where justice flows like rivers, where every nation bends the knee not under compulsion, but in awe and love for the King of Kings. He describes the New Jerusalem descending, not a city made by human hands, but a divine reality. This is not a restoration of Eden. It is greater than Eden, a world where heaven and earth are united, where the holy dwell in perfect fellowship with the eternal, where the tree of life once more stands in the midst, bearing fruit in every season for the healing of the nations. There is no temple, for God himself is the temple. There is no need for sun or moon, for the glory of the Lord is its light. And into this city come those written in the book of life, those who did not bow to the fallen ones, who did not chase forbidden knowledge, who did not worship power, but instead walked in faith, even when the world mocked them. Enoch also saw the final defeat of the spirits of the Nephilim, those restless demons, who had plagued mankind for generations. With the coming of the Son of Man, they are silenced, judged, and banished to the abyss forever. Their influence, once global, is utterly severed, and mankind, at last, is free not just politically or socially, but spiritually liberated from the curse of rebellion. And what of the Watchers? Bound since the days of Enoch, their time of waiting ends. One by one, they are brought before the throne. There is no more pleading, no more mercy. They are cast into the lake of fire, a realm beyond time, where their fall will echo forever. A warning to all creation that even the most glorious beings cannot escape judgment when they rebel against the Holy One. Enoch is shown that the timeline of redemption had always been known in heaven. From Adam to Noah, from the flood to Abraham, from the prophets to the Messiah had all been orchestrated. And now, with the final act complete, the cosmos breathes anew. Peace is not just the absence of war. In Enoch's vision, peace is the full alignment of creation with its creator. The stars return to their courses. The elements rest. The earth yields its fruit without pain. Animals no longer devour. Humanity, once fractured by language and blood, becomes one people under one king. And in the midst of this restored world stands the Son of Man, the same one Enoch saw exalted before the throne. The one who walked among men was rejected, crucified, and risen. His scars are now crowns. His humility is now majesty, and his rule is forever. Enoch's final message is clear. This was never just about the fall of angels or the rise of giants. It was always about the triumph of the king. The battle was never between equals. God was never surprised. The rebellion of the Watchers, the deception of the Nephilim, the corruption of mankind, all of it was allowed for a season so that grace could be revealed, justice could be upheld, and love could be displayed in its most radiant form. And now, Enoch fades from the narrative not in death, for he never died but in silence. Taken by God, translated into glory, his scrolls preserved for the time when the earth would need them again. Perhaps that time is now as wars rage, as knowledge increases, as humanity unlocks secrets once buried deep. Are we once again playing with the forbidden? Are we building towers of pride, reviving the spirit of Babylon, inviting the same ancient powers to whisper once more? If Enoch were among us today, he would not ask us to speculate. He would call us to repent. He would call us to look past the distractions, the pride, the deception, and gaze again toward the heavens, to remember the throne, to fear the judge, to long for the king, and most of all, to stand, because the Watchers fell. The Nephilim perished. The giants were defeated, but the faithful, those whose names are written, will rise, and they will shine like the stars forever. Enoch was not writing to the past. He was writing to us, to a final generation that would face the same spirits, the same temptations, the same deception. But he also wrote of a coming king, of restoration, and of a future where righteousness would rule forever. The question is not whether the story is true. The question is, are you ready for what comes next?